Hello and welcome to this Kali Fundamentals video. I'm very excited to work with you today. So if you're wondering, how do I get started with using Kali? I want to get it downloaded, get it working, but I want to do it securely. Great questions. So those are some of the objectives that we're going to be touching on here soon. How to safely download Kali and validate that it is in fact secure, some basic use of a hypervisor and how to find one and what that is, and knowing at a high level the differences between a full installation versus a live boot of Kali. So let's go ahead and jump into where we can get Kali from. So using your web browser, you can navigate to kali.org/downloads. Now there's a lot of different distributions, but we're going to focus on the 64-bit or 32-bit variants of that. We did a quick click over here to download the flavor of choice, and you'll notice that's happening, that there's a checksum over here to the right. So keep that in mind. We'll touch on that here in a moment, and I'll show you how that checksum can be valuable in ensuring that your tools are secure. So let's go ahead and talk at a high level about a hypervisor and what that is, and how that's going to help us to run Kali. So I did a quick search for one of my favorite hypervisors, VMware Workstation Player. So you can click on the downloads link over here, and this will bring you to a page that looks similar to this. At the time, VMware 15 Workstation Player was the current version. I went ahead and downloaded that for Windows. Now, you can use a different hypervisor to run this system. Essentially what this is doing is you have at the base your current operating system, and this hypervisor is going to allow you to run what's called a guest or a guest operating system on top of that. So this will be Kali or any other thing you want to run. It's kind of like Inception. It's a dream within a dream. This is just an operating system within an operating system. You don't have to dual boot or do anything of that nature. You can just run it with your current hardware and resources. Makes it a little bit more convenient. So remember we talked about that checksum and what we were going to do with it? Let's touch on that at a high level as well. So a checksum is a way that we can validate the integrity of a file. So in this case, we looked at this SHA-256 checksum right here, and those are what are over here to the right. So if you take this file, do a checksum using SHA-256, those numbers should match. So I used a tool that's online. It's called onlinemd5.com was the site, and you get a window that looks like this on the main page. I simply selected my downloaded version of Kali and selected the SHA-256 checksum type. So it ran, and it provided me with this output. So what I did is I took the output and I compared it with the number that I had here, and lo and behold, we had a match. So what that tells me is that my tool should not have been altered, and it should be in a safe state. You always want to check your tools, and that just ensures that you don't get any infections or bad guys on your systems. So speaking of checksums and checking those, let's do a quick check on learning. A tool that allows you to run a virtual machine is known as, so we use this word a couple times, hardware definitely not. So hardware allows you to run tools. Without hardware you really can't, but in this case we're talking about the specific tool, not hardware. We didn't mention hyperterminals or using a hyperterminal. That's typically used for configuring devices and things of that nature. Not in this case is it allowing us to run virtual machines. So the likely choice here is a hypervisor. Remember, a hypervisor allows us to run an operating system within an operating system. So let's go ahead and prepare for takeoff. You should go ahead and install your hypervisor of choice. In this case, you're going to be looking at VMware Player and how we set Kali up from here. So once you get VMware Player installed or your hypervisor of choice, in my instance, I've already got several machines here, but you're going to go ahead and create a new virtual machine using the ISO that you've downloaded. So once you create a new virtual machine, it's going to give you this option and ask you to point to the file. So what you'll do is I downloaded my copy of Kali to a thumb drive, selected it, and bam, there we go. It gives me this, this new option here. Now you may note that the RAM is a little bit lower on your machine. If you want to make an adjustment and change a few things with how resources are going to be allocated to this virtual machine, then you can edit those settings here. When you click Edit Settings, you've got a couple options under hardware, at least in the VMware Player hypervisor. And from there, I went ahead and selected memory, bumped up the volume a little bit on that, and now I've got 2 gigs to use. So when you're ready to get started, you can go ahead and click the play button here in this case, and you should get something that looks like this. Now, in this instance, we're going to be using Live Boot and talking about that at a high level. Live Boot essentially allows me to not have to install Kali, and it essentially just starts running, allows me to jump right in and start working with some commands and some tools and doing some things, but it's not persistent, meaning if I reboot the system, lose the system, have to power it down for some reason, I lose all my work and information. But for the sake of the lessons we'll be doing, Live Boot is going to be the quickest and easiest way to get started. If you want to do a full install, which is going to have persistence, it'll maintain information between reboots, it'll allow you to do some customization, things of that nature. By all means, go ahead and do a graphic install and work with it from there. But once you Live Boot into the Kali environment, you'll be ready to go and should just have a desktop, and you can run and gun from there in the continued lessons and follow along with us there. So with those things in mind, let's do a quick check on learning. Now, we just talked about this, so keep that in mind. What is the primary difference between Live Boot and a full installation based on the options here? Well, we didn't talk about this, but Live Boot is definitely not faster with the boot time. So, that is not a benefit of Live Boot. There's not a greater amount of tools or a less amount of tools available based on one or the other. You can add tools to the installation if you do a full install, but if you do that in Live Boot and then reboot, you lose that. And that comes to our answer here, that there's no persistence between reboots with Live Boot. So that's a very, very major difference between a full installation and Live Boot. Now, I want to point out some additional resources that you can use. For those of you that have access to the labs and things of that nature, I used the Host Data Integrity Baselining Lab, and they have a copy of Kali Linux under the machines that you can use. If you're not looking to download a hypervisor and do an installation on your system, and you would just rather jump right in and be able to work with some commands and start navigating the environment, this is a good lab and a virtual machine to use. Do keep in mind, as we discussed previously, you may see some differences in some areas of this version versus the version you may see me using in our navigation videos and things of that nature. The commands should still be the same, and again, the team is always updating tools, updating what they use, so you may see some differences, but don't fret. The underlying commands that we'll use are going to remain the same. Now, in summary, we went over Kali and a hypervisor and gave you some tips and tricks on how to ensure that those things are secure and safe when you're using them. We did some high-level differences between Live Boot and a full installation, and I gave you a few additional resources that you could use instead of having to install everything and just jump right in and start working some commands. So I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to working with you again soon.